and welcome to the last day of Jazz I Am. We hope you've learned a lot over the last 2 days, and we're just delighted that we've been able to provide you with this virtual space to build international connections. And so we're nearing the end of this year's program, but let's not be hasty because we still have a full day of activities to enjoy before we part. So let's actually just jump into this powerful day, and let's start with the first activity of the day, which is a panel discussion on current jazz. So the jazz that's being created by the new generations. We'll discuss who is at the forefront of this emerging scene and how can we make sure that they can reach more audiences. And so to discuss this really important topic, we welcome two experts and the moderator, Mark van Schaik, who is a music journalist and also the programmer at In Jazz in the Netherlands. Remember, just as we've been doing, that you can interact and participate in this panel discussion through the chat that will appear on your screen, and they will make sure to answer your questions. So let's go. Let's start. Mark, good morning. The
Good
floor
morning.
is all yours.
Good morning, Ailey. Thank you very much for your introduction. Nice to be here. Nice to be at Jazz I Am. Last year, I had the pleasure to be at the live edition, and we'll do it online this time and make something great of it. I enjoyed the last 2 days, the showcases, and some of the panels that I followed. And I'm happy to be here with two very distinguished and resilient gentlemen, Daniel Best and Kenneth Killeen. And I was told that if they just raise their hand, they will not be visible. Maybe they can do something more than raise their hand. Kenneth, how are you?
Good morning. How are you, Mark? How are you, Jazz I Am? It is great to be here, albeit digitally. I was at Jazz I Am, I think it was 2 years ago, and I just remember the amazing vibe that was down there, and the heat coming from Ireland. I swear to God, it was so hot. I was really hot, but I yearn for that now, as I see in a very cold Ireland.
Hi,
Daniel. Hi.
I'm Daniel. It's my first time in this sort of conference. I've been to jazz conferences. This is my first time with Jazz I Am. Thank you for having me.
Daniel, you're based in Berlin.
Yep, in cold Berlin, very cold.
Cold, yeah. It's below zero there, I guess. The same here in the Netherlands at the moment. So yeah, different from Barcelona, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. I would like to start with a short introduction of both of you. Daniel, you have been I believe for a long time already, more than a decade with X-Jazz. As one of the more progressive festivals in Germany and especially in Berlin. You're not the only festival, but it seems to me that you're the broadest minded festival, starting from a jazz point of view. Can we say that it's like that?
Yeah, I would say so. Totally, very broad. I mean, totally different than the traditional jazz fest we have here, which is also changing thanks to the great new director of the festival. Yeah.
Yes. And Kenneth, you with 12 points, based in Dublin, but obviously a festival that every second year branches out to Europe, various countries in Europe. In 2019, we saw a great edition in the Bimhuis in Amsterdam. This year was a Dublin edition again, but obviously it was cancelled to obvious reasons. You wouldn't consider yourself a jazz festival per se as well, I think.
Well, I mean, we have the whole discussion about what is jazz, I suppose. No, I mean, it's a jazz festival. I mean, in kind of name, for sure. But I mean, the music is the word itself is there to be challenged, and I think that it's about current innovation and current creativity and the future of the music, really. So that's kind of where we take our starting point from. what is jazz in Europe in the 21st century, and what does that mean, and where is that going, and who are the voices? So,
Exactly.
I mean, the trouble with running a festival or anything like that is you have to call it something. But quite often things are, you gotta dive a little bit deeper to get to the meaning of what we're trying to do.
Yes. So my first question to both of you would be, do you think that the artists, and especially the younger generation that you're dealing with, are still thinking in terms of genres at all? Maybe Daniel first.
Oh wow, that's a complicated question, I would say, in general. I mean, I don't think that the young people are so well. It's both. Some people want to follow a tradition, yeah, as they may have input from their peers, from parents, friends, uncles, family, and they are, of course, introduced to the idea of jazz in the old school perspective as as jazz festivals we know. And then there's, of course, the other people who come through trends, for example, through going to a record store and discovering music. And for them, they discover all kinds of music. If it's jazz, it's jazz. If it's hip hop, it's hip hop. But they won't necessarily, hip hop can also be jazz for some people. And so I think there's both of these sides still there for the young people. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Kenneth?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I mean, for the people, the participants today, I think it's important to say that I'm a failed musician. I studied jazz before I decided to become a promoter. So I've kind of, I still play occasionally, but the point is that as a musician, I don't think a lot of musicians think in terms of genre. They don't think in that kind of linear way, and that's the way it should be. I mean, music is far more nebulous than that, and it's more of a round thing as opposed to like the only linear thing that I think of when I think of music is journalism, which is people having to write about what people are doing, and then the labels start and the genre thing and the comparisons start. So I'm not bothered with genre whatsoever because I think that that's still a very limiting factor in thinking about maybe about programming, or in thinking about how to express what you're playing or what you're performing. I think the start of every genre is very clear. At the beginning, when jazz was kind of emerging, and we're talking about a music that is so young, really. It's about 100 years. So if you look at it in the context of other genres, it's very, very young, and the pace at which it has evolved is ridiculous. I mean, and it's been impacted by so many factors, socioeconomic, race, everything has been a dominant factor in the development of the music to where it is now. And I think that basically, I really don't like talking about genre too much because I think it misses the point about what people are trying to express. And I think that, for people in Europe that are based in Europe, that are born in Europe, there is a traditional aspect to this idiom, which is to be respected, and it is fantastic. And if people want to perform at that to a very high level, that is amazing, absolutely, 100%. But then there's the danger of becoming kind of trying to emulate something which has gone before, which had a different precedent. It had a different precedent in race, it had a different precedent in geography, and we don't necessarily have those. So it's about being true as an artist. It's about being true to what you're creating, and to limit that kind of thinking by applying a genre on it is, I think, it can be dangerous, actually.
Yes.
Well said.
When you are as a programmer, when you are working on your festival, I think the main factor that you're looking for in new artists is something original, something new. Still, that means that in my idea, mostly people who are trying to do something new are outside of the dominant culture. The dominant jazz culture, dominant hip hop culture. Um, don't you? Would you agree that this, per definition, stretches the limits of each genre and the limits of what you can do to in a festival?
There's
Yeah.
no limits.
Yeah. Okay.
For me, there's no limits in general. The thing is, we have to be sure. I mean, before I go into the genres and how to reach the right, to get book the right artists, I must say the beginning is my festival a commercial festival, or is it a sponsored festival by a city or by sponsors? That's the first question I have. I want to start here because it's about money at the first point. If I could book if I could book what I want, I can go. I can book anything I want if I don't have to think about money. Yeah. And I want to pay my artists as well. Yeah, and I want people to come to my festival as well. So those are probably the most preliminary thoughts I would have to have before I start booking the festival. Yeah, and then I want to know, what is my festival about? What do I want? In my case, the Mix Jazz Festival started because we wanted to start something with the people in Berlin and all the international artists who live in Berlin. As we know, a lot of artists who live in Berlin don't even perform in Berlin. They just use it as a hub to play somewhere else. Yeah. So in that case, we already knew we have a big, so many artists in Berlin, and we don't even know who lives here. In the sense, we had to figure it out. Yeah, and then we sort of certain people came as resident people who could book regularly. But back to the question, as we want to cross boundaries and young people. I mean, in general, we also said we want to book Berlin people. So, and a lot of that is for me, and of course, in Berlin, we have a big electronic scene where I also come from. So for me, in general, jazz has been improvised music, no matter which genre. Is it classical music, or is it neoclassic, or is it electronic music with machines? That's all possible for me. So I was able to talk to electronic musicians who have jazz backgrounds. Do you want to play for us? I don't know. Yeah, let's try it out. Yeah. So the thing is, so that way, and then of course you have the people, but maybe I'm going too far. The question is about the boundaries. We want to cross boundaries because that's what festivals are about. We cannot look at, and that's the main problem we have. And festivals like Montreux have showed us that things can be done differently. And this has been like 50 years now. Yeah. And not 20 years or 10 years, but there's still festivals who still have an old white men aspect to it in Europe, yeah, where you have 50-year-olds going to festivals. So, well, we need young people at our festivals, and we have to reach them and what they want to hear and what they want to listen to. Yeah. So that's, I didn't know if I really answered the question, but
yeah, I think you made your point with X-Jazz very clear.
Yeah.
Of course, with 12 points, Kenneth, the way you select your 12 acts is different from the way Daniel goes about.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, but at the same time, look, I mean, a couple of things here. 12 points, we're always looking to showcase innovation. We are definitely looking for new voices, and there are only 12 slots in which to do that. And we want the reflection of the program to be very current. Look, programmers, I guess, are always trying to tell stories. Or at the very least, reveal the current narrative or the musical pulse, right? And with our festival, of course, within the 12 bands, we do want to showcase diversity within that, because it's not one-dimensional. It's very much hyper 3D. It's kind of very much different opinions. Just like this music, I mean, the DNA of this music is around improvisation, and improvisation is synonymous with originality, and self-expression, and that's what you want to ultimately kind of showcase. Where is the originality, of these people taking the music? The danger, I suppose, just to kind of balance that comment, I suppose the danger is that we live in a very interconnected world right now, and the kind of danger that can happen with that. I mean, it's great because you can listen to music from everywhere, access all of this information, and for an artist it can be overwhelming because it's like, okay, well, which direction do I go in? If they don't have enough confidence in their own directional belief, you know what I mean? so the danger, that's the good thing, the discovery aspect. But the danger then is the imitation aspect. You know, we kind of have a danger of living in a kind of a copy-paste world. And to be quite honest with you, in a copy-paste world, this is how scenes develop. And originality arises out of that after a period of time. But you know, we don't want, I certainly, this is a personal comment, I do not want Europe to be reduced to like a homogenous sound. You know what I mean? That's the biggest worry, I suppose, that any performer could have. So the programming is there to reflect the diversity against that. So true originality, I suppose, means something. I mean, it means all the risks are taken, and they don't have to pay off. We want to showcase the people that are, you know, pushing the boundaries there for sure.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Short question. How many? I would like a short answer. How many emails from artists who like to play your festival did you receive in the last week?
Oh, good Lord. Well, look, with the short answer, Mark, way too many. With the pandemic, you know, everybody is putting together really good emails now, and they take a long time to go through. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a number on it because they filter to a separate mailbox pretty much at this stage, but it's quite a lot. You know, it is quite a lot, and it's a very, very competitive space.
Same with you, Daniel.
We always get a lot of mails. I don't get them. They also go into the XJazz email account. But we're booking 80 shows to 100 for the festival, and as we are, so people who don't know, we're booking these into regular clubs that are also used for rock music or for other sounds. And the shows go from like 100 people to 1,000 people, and it's all in one area in Berlin-Kreuzberg. So we're using venues that are all equipped. Yeah, nothing is set to be set up. So we have pretty much a plug and play possibility because the sound and lights are already installed. But back to your question, I wanted to people inform everyone about that situation. But I get a lot of emails and people ask me, but you're probably going to ask us, so how do we do it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, exactly. What do you do with those emails?
I actually read random mails. I do read at times, but I still feel that I always tell musicians that it's not the right way to get on a festival. Personally, I personally say if you can meet me somewhere, meet me. Yeah, and be personal. Yeah, and everyone else is sending email as well. And of course, an agent is always good because the agent can, you know, talk to me and know what I like and present to me things that are potentially things I would book. Yeah. But of course, I mean, Kenneth wants to, of course, have a diversity of things and wants to keep things open. I know more or less what I want to have for the festival. Of course, things can intrigue me. Yeah. And then I might want to book them. But this is a very complicated process. And I must say, I like to go from bottom up and top down at the same time when I do a booking, when I book the festival. Yeah. Okay. Meaning I personally like to look for, first of all, local acts in general. Yeah. Anything. And I often like to send Facebook emails at times just to my bubble to send me stuff to listen to. And then it's easier for me to look at links on a Facebook site as all the single emails. Yeah. And usually, and I also tell everyone, don't send me elaborate envelopes or anything at all. I don't need pictures. I want to hear the music because that's what's the most important thing. We want to present music mostly. Yeah. Of course, someone might have an elaborate light show. Then we have to see the video. But still, I personally always say, listen, it doesn't matter how big the letters are and which pictures and which decoration you have in your email. I want to hear the music. That's the most important thing. But of course, in this whole world where things get packaged and sold, it's sometimes not understandable for young people that I just say I want to hear the music. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and you have the lucky situation, I guess, in Berlin, like we have in Amsterdam, that when you talk about local acts, it can still be from all over the world.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, in our case, we just for the general information, we program everything from exotic music things, or I use this old word, world music. I mean,
Yeah.
from different cultures. A lot of crossover things, because people move to Berlin, they start using other people. So there's a lot of great acts which are what's the word, transcultured, yeah, and things like that. Of course, we have a big classical scene as well, and of course a lot of jazz musicians who are just here, and they also play a lot of sessions and have their own acts. And we can also ask people, you want to do something, one musician, and he comes up with whatever he wants to do. So sometimes we give like a carte blanche here, go ahead, just do it, yeah.
Yeah.
And that way it's not a fixed project, it's not something we're booking in advance. We know what's going to happen. You tell him, you just do it, yeah. So
Okay, can I ask
or
you?
her, excuse me, or her, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, yes.
Important.
Maybe, Kenneth, can you explain me how you keep up with musical developments in general? There used to be a time where we all read magazines and went to the local shop and asked what was new, etc. But obviously, this has changed a lot. And as you already mentioned, everything is available through the internet. But how do you shift, and how do you select at all?
Well, I mean, look, music is everywhere, as we know. And that makes it harder for artists, and I realize that. The pre-pandemic, I mean, I would go to showcases a lot. I suppose as a programmer, I don't know if Daniel would agree with this, but if you're a younger artist, or just in the very early stages of your career, I realize how hard it is to try and break through what can sometimes seem to be an impenetrable wall. But I rely on my peers, so other programmers. If other programmers message me and say that they've heard an artist, that they think is very, very good, that's probably, I would give that very strong consideration over, and then the next, obviously the best thing is me having been there in the room, to see the band. I mean, but that's not always possible, right? So what do you do? I mean, look, I use whatever's available to me. I usually spend an afternoon on a Friday, usually spend about 2 hours just going through, like I have to batch all of these things, because like 12 Points is just one of our festivals. We do 3 other festivals, and we also do club shows, and we also are a resource agent and things like that. So the time I have is very limited to kind of look at that stuff. And emails are a part of that. But I suppose if I had any advice to give about emails, I mean, emails are okay. The content of emails is not often, I would really, people who send mass, I understand as an artist, if you want to send emails to all of the programmers, but just realize that programmers are human. And if I see an email that hasn't any reference to the festival that I program, that looks like a general press release, they don't have a lot of weight to them, because they're coming at a point, they're coming from a place where there's no reference. So if you're, I suppose if you're emailing any programmer, research the festival, look at other acts that you might contrast or compare yourself to in previous editions of the festival, and make that an email that, it starts with the subject line. Make the subject line interesting, because like there's a lot of emails. I mean, look, if you look at your own inbox, you'll see all the stuff that you never open. You never open it because you're like, oh, that's just another. We are very highly attuned to email in modern society. Like if it's not, if it doesn't grab your attention in the subject line, you're not going to open it. It's the exact same. It's the exact same as a programmer. I mean, if it looks like a general press release, full of exclamation marks and just generalized content, yeah, that might work for some people. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't speak to me. It doesn't resonate with me. So the content of emails needs to be carefully considered, I think. And I think that, maybe less emails, but more specifically generated. And I know it's more administration. I know it's more work, but it's actually, there are many times where I've read an email and gone, okay, this person has made like a really strong effort to kind of understand how they would fit into one of our programs. So I'm going to click on the link. This is how do you sell your music without the music? That's what it is. It's how do you sell it without the person having heard a note?
Be
you know,
aware who you are sending your emails to. Be aware of the festival that you're trying to contact. Know what they have done, etc.
yeah,
Just be informed
yeah.
instead of bulking. Yeah.
Exactly. Bulking is not a good idea. I think it's, you know, I think you're using up a lot of energy, and I think the energy is displaced. I think you could use the energy in a better way, maybe. But no, to come back to discoverability, you know, I mean, I listen to playlists. I kind of batch stuff off and I listen to it in one go. I listen to a load of stuff in my car, actually.
Okay.
It's the only place that's like peace and quiet, like the phone isn't ringing, or you know, the obvious. I like the car, and I sometimes do, you know, journeys up and down the country, and it's like 3 or 4 hours, and man, I have a great time there singing. Well, not singing, but you know, bopping away, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Daniel.
Yeah, I would confirm what Kenneth says. I listen to my peers as well, especially colleagues from other festivals around the world, and people who said, who like send me stuff. Hey, check this out. Check this out. Yeah, or hey, this guy lives in your city. Check him out. Yeah, things like that. So that's really, really important. I have a weekly radio show on a proper radio station in Berlin. So I have to listen to music anyway every week, and I must say, a lot of stuff I get through promotion. A lot of stuff I get through Spotify suggestions. Because I, of course, working my Spotify playlist for a few years now, and so I usually get a lot of new stuff from regular artists. But also, I like to look at, if you like this, you might like that, and then I listen through a lot of things to see what this could be, and who are the people who would be similar to this artist. So that's how I discover a lot of music, to be honest. And of course, when I go somewhere or I see a band and I'm really intrigued, I booked Netta Al-Khayyam, a singer from Israel, because I saw her in Israel and she happened to be playing in Berlin, and I heard she was coming, so I booked her. And I was so that was a typical thing. I saw her, I booked her. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was international in this case. But also in Berlin, I go to shows sometimes, random, and then I see people that I didn't think I would hear, and then I was like, okay, I need this person. Yeah.
Yes.
I do go to record stores, and I think record stores is something that has been hyped the last years, but not really understood. A lot of music comes out on vinyl, but not on other, maybe not on Spotify, maybe only on Bandcamp. So there I often discover things, and also record store owners say, Daniel, you got to listen to this. This guy is from here. This guy is from that. So like a band from Naples called Pellegrino, a producer who has a band and does things with other musicians. They have their own kind of Napoli funk, jazz, soul sound. I was like, wow, this is interesting. I discovered it in the record store and not on Spotify, and not because someone wrote me, because I discovered it myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
because a record store guy said, oh, listen to this. Yeah, so
Cool.
a record store is for me still a possibility to, or like Greg Fote, who is an English musician. I discovered his things through the record store because my record store guy said, I've been selling so many copies of this. I said, in Berlin, really? Okay, I gotta check this out. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I find myself more and more on Bandcamp these days. I gave up on Spotify a bit because basically because we have a family account and my children hijacked the account. So I'm not bothering with playlists there anymore. But I think Bandcamp works very well actually with the recommendations, and especially if you discover a certain label that you like, it can bring you to a whole range of artists. Which brings me to the following question. There used to be a time where record companies or labels were sending out promos and mailings and all that, even to festivals and obviously to journalists and all. Do you still have that sort of lines going with record companies at all, or maybe local labels? Or Daniel, you did some interviews on the XJazz website with labels. Is that through personal knowledge?
Well, that's mostly through personal knowledge, because a lot of people, as I come from the electronic club music scene, actually, originally. So, but a lot of these producers have ventured into other fields. So I'm still in contact with them, like Frank Wiedemann, who does Bigamo Records, who's actually comes from a jazz background, but is an electronic musician and does a lot of very successful electronic live acts. And so I wasn't always in contact with him, and he's booking things that cross over. So they always send me stuff, and so I says, well, can you suggest me things? And then also Matthias Modica from Cryptox is trying to build up his own trademark and looking for bands in the German scene, especially around Munich, Hamburg, and Berlin, is finding great stuff. So I am trying to work with labels and especially trying to get them to, you know, to look at our national scene or the scene in Germany, no matter where the musicians are from, but from Germany, that way. Not national in the sense of national, but I am always curious what they're coming up with. Of course, again, they are doing marketing for their labels. So as a festival person who has to sell tickets, I'm happy when they also do promotion for their acts. If you are just an act with no label, or you are like a total independent, it's a different story. Of course, I want to book you as well. But for me, of course, a label can package a band, a newcomer, differently than a person who's totally alone.
Yeah. Okay. Kenneth, is there a record industry in Ireland functioning at the moment?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that this is like, it's interesting because I think labels have become more, once again, they've become a kind of a grassroots, highly localized thing, almost like a boutique type of thing. And I think that like that's appealing to the true fans of the music, you know. And I think that actually is probably one of the kind of the older paradigms that I think is working well in this new way that the music industry works, I suppose. I totally agree with Daniel. I mean, I would support, you know, local domestic labels, an artist on that roster, absolutely, because I mean, because you can see the work that goes into, you know, I mean, these are not profitable enterprises for the most part. You know, these are labors of love, and I think it's really important to support that. And I think that in like that's kind of like an analog circuit, an analog system of music discovery. You know, and I think, you know, everything, you know, vinyl, etc., is great. Everything except cassette tapes is totally cool, you know, just cassette tapes. Because I mean, I actually am getting cassette tapes in the mail, and I'm like, oh, you know, I know what they are. You know, I grew up on them, but Jesus, I don't even have a cassette player anymore. So just like too hip for me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, like as I said earlier, the paradigm, you know, of the music industry has fundamentally shifted, and I think it's futile often to try and apply the old methodology to the new music industry. And by that I mean the hierarchy that we traditionally associate with the music industry. Like, you need to get on a label, you need to have, you know, an album out with this person, you know, you need to then get an agent, you need to have a manager. I mean, I don't think all of those things are, you know, given the immediacy of the internet, it's certainly not easier, but I don't think you necessarily need all of those, you know, that sort of that chronology of artistic development. I think a lot of artists kind of are looking for that, and I think they're probably looking in the wrong place, because I don't think it doesn't apply. You know, it might have applied. You know, I think it stopped applying around 2005 or 2006 when things changed. You know, that was a year where, like, you know, a lot of developments in social media and stuff. That was the seed point of a different interaction that we have with everything, with all content. So I think a lot of artists seem to be getting very stressed if they don't have an agent or a manager, and they think that will unlock, and certainly, of course, it will unlock doors. But, you know, it goes back to what I said earlier about the email things. I mean, you know, if somebody had researched 12 or whatever, you know, researched one of the festivals, and, you know, they knew that, you know, that the programmer knew another programmer, and then they put in a quote from that programmer, that's a peer review that I would go, oh, okay, so, you know, so Daniel is like, yeah, that's a great quote from Daniel. Or Mark from InJazz, amazing festival, Mark, fantastic, you know, it's 12 points, you know, all over, it's fantastic. You know, this showcasing model is amazing. But yeah, if Mark says, you know, quote from Mark up top there, you know, it sings to me as a programmer. Okay, I have a point of reference now. And I go, okay, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to look further. You know, so I'm sorry, I'm rambled because I can't even remember what your question was, Mark. My apologies.
Well, it was about the record industry, and
Yeah.
obviously for an outsider, and probably for most people who are watching right now, it's difficult to get an idea what the local Irish scene, especially in this genre, if I may say so, will look like. So where to start? You know, where to get an idea.
Tribe Records. Go to. I mean, we're actually something really cool happened a few years ago. We set up. Well, we were part of. There were about 8, you know, very non-commercial, you know, left to center stables in Ireland, and they set up a group called Gnarly, which is the National Association of Record Labels in Ireland. So it's gnarly, like is in the American term for fantastic, amazing, but that's the acronym. So if people search for gnarly, I mean, what we started doing a few years ago was,
maybe you could put it in the chat.
I will. We started doing something interesting a few years ago. You know, instead of having an AGM, which is an annual general meeting, we had an AGM, which was an annual general music, where all of the labels would get together for 60 minutes, and instead of talking, every label would be at a table and they would all play excerpts from what they had and all electronic stuff. And I was the chairperson, so I was responsible for putting in some really raucous sounds to indicate the splits. And it was a really interesting way of showcasing the label and showcasing the work that these labels are doing, you know. So I'll put it in the chat once I find the link.
Daniel, do you can you agree with Kenneth in the way that the local labels have returned to sort of a grassroots approach and maybe more important now than they were 10, 15 years ago?
I think there are. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And especially in Berlin, we have thousands of labels. And we also have a few associations who also do things. But the fun thing is that people, they actually press up records 300, 500, and they go themselves to the record stores and sell them directly. So often you will find something in a record store, a vinyl record store, which you will not find anywhere else. And then I'm like, so who's this? Give me the contacts. And the record store owner, you know, sends me the contact directly because he bought the records and he has the email of the person who sold him the records. So I go like detective work. So who is this? Yeah, I need this. Yeah. So and so someone made the effort to press a record to get that record mastered and go to himself or herself, herself or himself, and then they put it up in the store. And I think that's also in parallel to that email, which is personalized, someone who made an effort. He made an effort to get that record into the record store where he thinks it will be sold. Yeah. And it gets sold. Yeah. And also those cassettes, which I do have a cassette player, but I also not really want to listen to my old tapes.
Yeah. Do you have a sort of an umbrella organization in Berlin as well, or in Germany for these independent labels?
Yeah, we have many organizations in Germany. We're very well organized in Germany, as you might know. But I'm not really into organizations, to be honest. So I don't really look necessarily to those organizations to discover things. Maybe because I'm a bit biased, that I don't think everything will be reflected in these organizations. And things like those people musicians who don't want to talk to other people, they might sell their record in a record store. People who are not organized. Yeah. I think it's more democratic if I go to the record store in that sense.
If you have anything in mind that you can put in the chat for people to go to, maybe a starting point, that would be nice. But if not, then they'll maybe can start at your own website, you know, XJS.
Yeah, well, in general, I would say we have amazing scenes, and it's like the 50s, full circle. We have a local scene, definitely, and and a lot of people are doing things here, and of course, it's the time to be independent, to be honest. And I think, as Kenneth said, I always discuss these things. Kenneth was rambling about it, but managers, labels, and all these things. Of course, it's nice to have, but you can do it yourself, to be honest. And I represent artists to do things all themselves. Yeah. And I really believe in independent music business. Yeah.
All right. I got a question in the Q&A from some participant who asked if I see this. Yes, I see it. If you write a question in the Q&A, so feel free to ask Daniel or Kenneth your questions. I will pass them on. I got the question here. Is there a special focus on programming female musicians at all for both of you?
I was hoping someone would ask that question. Of course there is. That question, and as all our festivals worldwide, I think there's also a paradigmatic change, thankfully. But I must say, and I always like to say that, I also represent female artists in my. I also have an agency, Best Works, and I'm looking for female artists in general. Yeah, write me, no problem. But in general, it's still, if we look at the general, how many musicians are there? The majority is actually male. Yeah, and it doesn't. And I prefer to book good or good artists in general. What they are, I usually don't care. Yeah, what they do, background, whatever. But of course, I am looking for female artists, and it's also one of the most important things for our programming. But I will not, just to make a quota, book 50-50 if I don't find good enough artists, just to put it that way. Yeah. But I want to. I strive to do that. Yeah.
Did you adhere to the Key Change initiative?
I think we have my colleague. I'm not my colleague Murat from the X Jazz Festival. We're a big team, so I think we are involved in that. I was asked to speak on behalf of the booking situation in general, but we always push for that, and I must say our colleague Nadine from Jazz Fest Berlin has also influenced us strongly, and I think she's great. Yeah. And I think that we're on a good way, and I'm looking for those new amazing female artists.
Okay, Kenneth, can you elaborate on this a bit? Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, not just across female musicians, but female journalists, female sound technicians, lighting technicians. It's all very, very important for us. I mean, arguably it's easier for us to have a more balanced program because it's 12 bands and it's on a pan-European level. But we do give it active consideration, 100%, not just at 12 points, but with all the stuff that we do. I'm a board member of Europe Jazz Network, and there has been quite a lot of important, necessary work done on this to try and unravel, essentially many decades of kind of a system which, I mean, let's just be honest when you look back, But Daniel's point about the ratio of male to female artists, I mean, I totally agree with that. That's just the way it is. But we need to be seeding for the future, there's a strong, I suppose, concern about the see it be it philosophy, where we need more female artists, on stages to be role models to people to understand that, yes, this is a career path. In fact, we've done a lot of research domestically in Ireland on this, and it's not very encouraging. I mean, because one of our survey results was that over 73% of female artists who studied music at higher level in like secondary school, so in high school, they did not do anything music related. In at third level. So we know, what I mean? We know where there are kind of, breakpoints and issues, and, this issue about supply and demand. I mean, as a programmer, I just think we need to just to show that we can balance it as much as is possible. I know that for some festivals it is easier, and some festivals it is harder. But at the same time, this is something that's extremely important. So I'd urge people to go to the Europe Jazz Network website and the Key Change website as well.
Yeah, it would actually be interesting to hear what Taller de Musics is doing as far as percentages, male, female. I was curious about it. I have to ask Rosa afterwards, or maybe she can jump in here. I would like to go back to another way of maybe selecting music or being brought to attention to you is how much do you follow what the music journalism is writing? Is there enough music journalism working in the fields that you are interested in at all?
No, no, absolutely not. I think it's part of the supply and demand issue that I mentioned before. Certainly, there's journalists that I respect and I would listen to, but I think we have a huge problem on the reportage and promotional aspect from a journalism perspective on that. So I don't follow that many. Obviously, I read all of the relevant blogs and stuff like that. But again, it goes back to I rely on my peers more than I would rely on a journalist writing content. I read reviews, but yeah, for me, it's the problem is that there isn't enough of there isn't a critical mass in certainly in Ireland's perspective. We just have a huge problem with the lack of representation, both journalistically and on radio. And I think that I know actually from others across Europe that it might be slightly better in some countries, but all artists who work in a non-commercial capacity are facing an issue of being starved of the oxygen of the public discourse about it through journalism and through radio, etc. So,
how's the situation in Germany and Berlin?
Well, we still have a few magazines running. I do buy magazines every once in a while. The German magazine Jazz Thing I do buy at times. But what I also do is I just call one of the journalists who writes for Jazz Thing. Hey, Götz, what's hot? Yeah, I just call him up personally and say, hey, is there anything that you think might suit us? Because I'm usually the one booking the crossover stuff at the festival. So I'm like, if it's like funky or soulful, electronic,
yeah,
the different things, not the typical jazz festival acts. Although typical is it's not negative. Typical, the word I didn't know it's not negative. I mean, Avishai Cohen is an amazing artist. So that's not, of course, he gets booked if it suits our programming. But I'm not the person booking Avishai. I book the other things then. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And in general, I follow blogs. Of course, I come from the 90s, more or less, roughly, and I was socialized with the band. I still take care of Jazzanova since over 20 years, and with Giles Peterson, of course, who has done quite a lot of work at trying to reach younger crowds and bringing a different vibe to the whole thing. But that's only one aspect. There's other people doing that as well. There's US aspects, there's South African aspects, there's Japanese aspects, things that I also follow because we are international and we have contacts to music around the whole world, Indonesian, whatever. It all reaches us at some point. Someone will say, hey, listen to this. But that's, again, as Kenneth said, it's peer networks that roll here. Yeah. And people who have a similar idea how a festival could work, what music is about. And as I said, mostly often non-commercial because it's just good. That's what I'm saying. There's bad music and there's good music. That's and even if it's bad music, it has relevance in any which way. But it's just about taste. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. I would like to get back to something that Kenneth said earlier in the discussion. It was about the homogenization of music from Europe. There's a danger that a danger, that's all relative, but there's the possibility that artists from all over Europe start sounding the same because they all listen to each other and they get influenced by each other. But do you expect an artist from Barcelona to sound Catalan or Spanish? Or, I mean, what do you expect from something that's being sent to you from, somebody who just left Taller de Musics, for instance, or who's been playing in the clubs in Barcelona for a while? Is there any expectation then?
I have no expectation. I want to listen to every kind of music openly, without any bias, nothing. And I mean, you can have a great flamenco artist from Berlin. Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, but again, of course, if I go towards electronic scenes, of course, there's been a trend, uh, analog. I mean, live musicians playing with electronic artists, for example, is like a big trend. Yeah, everywhere, especially popular in France, I think. Um, Maybe where you have people playing beats and analog things, and that's happening all over. Yeah, and that kind of music can come from everywhere in the world. It's not a national thing. Yeah, I would say. Yeah, people are experimenting around, and of course, it is an economic question as well. I mean, an 8-person ensemble is different than having 2 people play, one playing an instrument, one playing machines. Yeah, it's just cheaper, of course, and that's why it can be booked easier. Yeah, and it's not such a big sound check. I mean, there's other, you know, there's honestly, those are other problems, questions that a festival has. You know, and of course, at some point, again, electronics and a musician. Again, you know, that could be boring. Maybe, yeah.
Kenneth?
Yeah, I agree with Daniel. I mean that, you know, the music, you know, any artist can exercise their right to assert any influence on their music, right? But I suppose in the context of 12 points, we are looking for the things that make the music different. We like geography is a consideration in obviously in the programming of 12 points. So a natural extension of that is, well, what is it saying? And you know, I think that particularly, and I've listened to a lot of Spanish jazz, I think the further you get from the center, the more you know, let's say, like there's a more of an ethnic slant to the influence on the music, right? And I think that's great, because I think it's, you know, from the periphery, you have artists that are looking more towards their own cultural heritage as a basis for improvisation than the Great American Songbook, which both are fine. But you know, the thing is, like, if again, it goes back to what I said earlier about, you know, being an artist that's true to oneself in terms of, well, you know, this is that old kind of thing about you know, what does a middle class white person have to sing the blues about? You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it's referential, right? So, but at the same time, you know, there needs to be something more than just a reflection of that. There needs to be then the innovation needs to be sprinkled on top of that. In just my opinion, you know, I like these elements as kind of like ingredients in a really weirdly improvised cake. But at the same time, I'm trying to say this. It's yeah. I mean, it's while you do hear stylistic differences, what I get like not down about, but what I just go, oh, you know, when I hear something that sounds the same, if I hear a Norwegian band and an Italian band sounding identical, I kind of go, okay, this could be a problem 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Maybe it won't, but no, I you know, I mean, like the thing is too, I mean, if you talk about Norwegian jazz, for example, you know, people automatically Nordic jazz, people associate it with a sound, with a thing, you know, they have that, you know, and that's essentially nothing more than a brand identity, okay?
Yeah, exactly.
But it's done well for them, because it speaks to a coherence in that particular part of Europe, and I think that yeah, you have somewhat the same with Italian, you know, jazz and stuff like that. But I think that these are all like signposts, you know. But if I hear a Spanish band doing Nordic stuff and it's great, of course I'll book it, you know. Of course I'll book it. It's good, you know.
Yeah. Funny that a lot of Nordic jazz came to us through ECM, which is a Munich label.
Yeah.
So I mean, that goes to show how it works. Yeah.
But you should not forget that that Norway is one of the first countries to understand that music is one of the most greatest exports they can have. And they put a lot of money into that to export it and make it a brand, as Kenneth also just said. And there's just books about that. I mean, the whole story about how Nordic jazz became popular.
Written by an Italian. Written by an Italian.
Yeah. I was just saying that.
Of the North, great book.
Yeah, so just saying that was an amazing move, I must say, for Norway in general. Yeah.
All right. Maybe a last question. What about the identity of your local scenes? How would you describe that?
Oh my God.
Wow. Well, I'll go first because I'll be shorter because I mean Daniel lives in Berlin, so I mean, you know, you're getting into war and peace territory length there. You know, I mean, you know, the scene in Ireland is quite small. We're a small country. We're also on the edge. You know, we're one of those, you know, island countries. We're one of the peripheral countries, and for me that kind of that's important. You know, because we do have a strong, I suppose, you know, identity. The scene is small, but it's very fully formed. I think we're very progressive in the music that we're making. I think it's easy for any programmer to say that their own domestic content is very progressive, but the reason I think the Irish content is so dynamic and interesting is when you come from the edges and you come from a small country, you really want to get off the island. You know what I mean? You really want to get out, especially as an improviser, you really want to get out there and collaborate. So I think a lot of Irish artists are really have their ear like wide open to the rest of Europe, like really wide open. And they're really open to this kind of collaboration. And with this pandemic, a lot of Irish artists have done some really interesting digital projects with artists from all over Europe because, you know, they have a network there. And I think that has stood them very well. So, I mean, Daniel mentioned earlier about this kind of, you know, I'll use the word very loosely, but this fusion of electronic music and jazz music. And you know, jazz music is like a sponge. It absorbs the popular music of the day, whatever that is. But the electronic thing, I think, will last a good while because of the pervasiveness of the technology and the cost associated with technology. You know, like things that in the 70s would take, you know, 4 days, you know, and about, you know, 60 meters of tape, you know, to achieve can be done, you know, very simply now. And so it's a new expressive modality that you're dealing with. And I think that a lot of artists will use that simply because it's readily available. So I see that developing further. But I mean, we've lots of great bands. I mean, we in Ireland that I would highly recommend people check out. We just did. We were a partner with other European countries for a 2-year project called Jazz Connective. And the last event was supposed to be in Lyon, but of course, pandemic, you know, nobody could be there. We did it all online. So people can check that out and get a sense of some of the Irish artists' work. We featured in one particular instance, we featured, you know, two jazz musicians playing, you know, electronic music. One is world champion turntablist and the other was drums and programming, and you know what, it's great. So you know,
all right,
so I'll let Daniel I'll go for a coffee now while Daniel talks about the local Berlin scene.
I guess you have to keep it really short, Daniel.
No, Berlin, there's no Berlin, there's no, I mean, there obviously electronic music and combined with as what Kenneth was saying, electronic music and improvisation is probably one of the main things coming out of Berlin at the moment. Okay, I just put it, that's the way it is. Yeah, but they're also playing jazz festivals and they're playing electronic festivals around the world and pop festivals. Yeah, so we're not confined to jazz festivals in general, but we also have a lot of people. We have Syrian musicians, of course, due to the immigrant crisis, bringing great music here to Berlin. Yeah. So there's a lot of international influences, Asian influences. We have Japanese artists doing their thing here. So we have a global melting pot. So I cannot define a Berlin sound at all. Yeah. But I try to cover as far as I can in my festival all the things that come towards me that I find interesting. And we are a team. I'm not the only booker. A festival today has to be done with a team. Yeah. And that with several generations as well, not just me. Yeah. Has to be younger people as well. And a team is what we need for a festival booking, not one person. That's over. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you very much. Hello, I'm popping in again. Very swift and short answer. Great. So thank you, guys. It was really a fascinating panel. I think participants will be able to take a lot out of it. And sorry, Mark, I think at one point you mentioned if Rosa could pop in, but she was at a meeting at the time. but she said she does want to, she's really interested in the topic you were actually discussing. And so that's it. Actually, thank you very much for participating. Thank you, Kenneth, Mark, and Daniel. And now, if you continue to stay tuned in into the Jazz I Am, we're popping into the Milano Jazz Club for yet another showcase. So stay tuned, relax, sit back, and click on the next link in the professional area.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Daniel. Great to chat.
Thanks, guys. See you
Okay,
later.
thank you, Road. Bye.